Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Nancy Joseph, aka The Dynamic Doc. Welcome back to my channel. So I hope everyone is staying safe amid this COVID-19 pandemic. Make sure you practice social distancing, good hand hygiene, and just standard precautions recommended by the CDC and World Health Organization. So, picking up where we left off in the last video, now we're in our third year of medical school, and so starts your clinical years. Now, in general, clinical years are your third and fourth year, and they're usually organized in rotations. So each rotation lasts a varying number of weeks. Oftentimes it's 4 weeks, and during those rotations, your job is to gain as much knowledge as you can. And you do that by both the clinical patients that you see and also, doing some at home kind of work. So you see a patient, maybe you saw a diagnosis that you weren't familiar with. Maybe, you saw symptoms that you're just be like, what other things could it be? Maybe this patient ended up having this diagnosis, but what other things were in the differential? Maybe you were familiar with the primary diagnosis, but you weren't familiar with a couple of the differential diagnoses. Then you want to go ahead and look those up, because what you want to do is have some self-directed learning, and then the things that you aren't able to find answers to, your attendings and the residents and other people that you're working with in that rotation could always provide extra answers and guidance. And so and then at the end of each rotation, there's usually an exam that you take that covers the essential parts of that rotation that you should have learned. And so while you're on the rotation, not only do you want to learn clinically, but there's also books that are available that kind of help summarize some key points that are related to each rotation. And you want to make sure that you read up on those, and that helps you be prepared for that exam that you take at the end of your rotation. Now, to that end too, there's a number of rotations that are called core rotations. So those are the ones that you have to do, and then everything else or most everything else are electives. And so some of those core rotations include pediatrics, family medicine, internal medicine. And so usually your medical school requires you to do a certain number of weeks in those core rotations. So at the end of your third year comes Step 2 or COMLEX 2 if you're a DO. Now, Step 2 has two parts, Step 2 and COMLEX 2. And that's a part that tests your clinical knowledge, where it's, your multiple choice, your standardized exams. And then there's another part that kind of tests your clinical skills, where there'll be standardized patients. So instead of an exam like you're used to taking, with multiple choice, it is a clinical, standardized exam that you're supposed to use your clinical skills to help both evaluate and diagnose the patient. So those are the kind of the two entities of what it's made of. Now, Step 2 / COMLEX 2 is important because it also it's also a large part or a significant portion of what's taken into account by the residency program directors to decide whether they're going to offer you an interview in the program or not. So you want to make sure that you have that in mind when you're doing these rotations, your clinical rotations. So you want to make sure that you effectively study for those, so that you're not starting from scratch when it's time to study for the Step 2. So you'll be starting from a good foundation, and then a part of what you're studying maybe a refresher, as opposed to just like I said, starting from scratch. And so that's usually taken, the Step 2 / COMLEX 2 is usually taken after third year or at the end of third year, before you start your fourth year. Oftentimes you can, use some vacation weeks to take that time off so that you can focus on studying. And then after that, you start your fourth year. Now, fourth year of medical school is when you can do the most electives, because the theory is that you would have done most, if not all, of your core rotations third year, because you need to do them in order to be prepared for the Step 2 or COMLEX 2. And you want to have done those before you apply for residency, which you'll be doing your fourth year. So, fourth year, you can do electives, and then that's when you get to do rotations at hospitals that you're interested in doing residency. And then, at location at which you're interested in doing residencies. And what that is, it turns into a live interview, because what happens is it's your opportunity to get to know them and for them to get to know you and to decide whether you're a good fit for that program. And you have to also be careful, because that also means that maybe if the rotation, let's say it's 4 weeks, you're kind of in a 4-week interview. So you want to be on your P's and Q's, and you want to put your best foot forward. So that way that increases your chance of getting an interview in that program. Because what that does is it puts you in a position where you're not just a name to a paper when your application comes across, the program director's desk. They'll be like, oh, I know that person, and, they do good work. So then it increases your chance of getting an interview. So that is kind of third year going into fourth year. And then usually in the late summer of fourth year, you apply to residency, and it's a centralized application system. And then once you apply to residency, then you start getting interviews. And so fourth year is electives mixed with, rotations at, like I said, places that you want to go to residency, at which you want to go to residency, and, applying for residencies, and also residency interviews. And so another important thing to note is you want to be financially mindful, because it takes money to apply to all of these residencies, but also it takes money to travel to these interviews. And so you want to be financially mindful going into fourth year of medical school, so that you are able to financially to go to all the interviews that are offered. So that's kind of your clinical years in a nutshell, leading right up to where, the match. And so at the time of making of this video, there's now a single match system. There used to be two, a DO match and an allopathic match. However, now it's all one single system. And so usually the match is in the spring, and then the match process is a kind of interesting phenomenon in a way in which, where you're going to go to residency is determined. So stay tuned for the next video, where I will get into more detail about that process. And in the meantime, go ahead and check out the last video. I'll go ahead and link it down below, just in case you haven't had a chance to check it out, so you can check it out. And don't forget to check out not just the last video, but my previous videos. And also, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Be blessed and stay safe. Peace.